Have you ever wondered why a woman who lived more than 2,000 years ago is still remembered all over the world today? Do you believe that with intelligence and courage alone, a young queen could shake the power of the two greatest empires of the ancient world? And if her story had not ended the way history recorded it, the map of the world today might have been completely different. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than. Today, on Echoes of Time, we begin the journey of discovering the life of Cleopatra, the last queen of ancient Egypt, a woman both mysterious and extraordinary. But this story is not only about history. It is also a wonderful way for you to learn English through real historical stories. If you enjoy exploring famous figures in an interesting way like this, remember to leave a comment and subscribe to Echoes of Time so you can join us for the next historical journeys. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in the city of Alexandria, one of the most brilliant and intellectually vibrant cities of the ancient world. Alexandria stood on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea where ships from across the world arrived every day. The city was famous for its enormous library, which held hundreds of thousands of books and attracted scientists, philosophers, and scholars from many lands who gathered there to learn and share knowledge. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than Cleopatra. Grew up surrounded by this atmosphere of learning and curiosity. From a young age, she was already different from many members of the royal family. She loved studying, reading books, and exploring the world around her. While many kings and queens relied mainly on power, Cleopatra believed that knowledge was the true source of strength. And that belief began to shape one of the most famous and controversial figures in human history. Cleopatra belonged to the Ptolemaic Dynasty, a family of Greek origin that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. Her ancestors came to Egypt after the time of Alexander the Great and gradually became the powerful rulers of this land. However, the Ptolemaic dynasty was also famous for its fierce struggles for power within the family. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than brothers and sisters could become enemies, and marriages between siblings in the royal family were considered normal in order to keep power within the dynasty. Because of this, the palace was always filled with intrigue and suspicion. Cleopatra grew up surrounded by stories of power, betrayal, and ambition. She quickly understood that to survive in this royal family, intelligence alone was not enough. One also had to be strong and wise. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than these lessons, prepared her to face much greater challenges in the future. From a very young age, Cleopatra showed a special curiosity about the world around her. She learned to read and write and studied many different subjects such as mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and music. What made Cleopatra stand out from many members of her family was her remarkable ability with languages. She did not only speak Greek, but also learned Egyptian and several other languages from neighboring regions. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than. Because of this, she could speak directly with ordinary people, merchants, and foreign diplomats. For Cleopatra, language was not just a way to communicate, it was also a tool to understand people and build power. Even at a young age, she realized that a true leader must know how to listen and understand the world around them. This insight later helped her become one of the most influential queens in ancient history. When Cleopatra was 18 years old, a major event completely changed her life. Her father died, and according to the traditions of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra became queen. However, she could not rule alone. She had to share the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old at the time. Officially, the two of them ruled Egypt together. But in reality, Cleopatra was the one making the important decisions. Is less than #0. 7# is greater than she met with foreign envoys, managed the kingdom's finances, and tried to keep the country stable during a time of great uncertainty. This situation made many of the young king's advisors unhappy. They believed that power should belong to the boy Ptolemy and to those who stood behind him controlling his rule. From that moment on, quiet tensions inside the palace began to grow, preparing to explode into a real conflict. The advisors of Ptolemy XIII gradually began to turn against Cleopatra. They spread rumors that she was too ambitious and did not respect tradition. Step by step, they convinced many people in the royal court to turn their backs on the young queen. Eventually, Cleopatra was forced to leave Alexandria and flee from Egypt. At that time, she was only 21 years old and had just lost her throne. For many people, this would have been the end of the story. But Cleopatra was not someone who gave up easily. She went to Syria and began thinking about how to regain her power. Instead of falling into despair, she started making plans, searching for allies, and trying to build a military force. Cleopatra understood that if she wanted to return to the throne, she would need more than the title of queen. She needed strength, strategy, and the right opportunity. While Cleopatra was preparing her plans in Syria, a major event was unfolding in Egypt. A powerful Roman general named Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria. He was pursuing his enemy Pompey during the Roman Civil War. Pompey fled to Egypt hoping to receive help, but the advisors of Ptolemy XIII decided to kill him in order to please Caesar. They believed this action would make Caesar their ally. However, they had miscalculated. Is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than when. Caesar arrived and learned what had happened. He was not pleased with the way Pompey had been killed. Now Caesar was staying in the royal palace in Alexandria and beginning to examine the political situation in Egypt. For Cleopatra, this was exactly the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to meet one of the most powerful men in the world. Cleopatra knew that if she could meet Caesar and convince him, she might be able to reclaim her throne. But the problem was that Alexandria was now controlled by her brother and his advisors. If she entered the city openly, she could be killed immediately. So, Cleopatra came up with a bold plan. One night, she secretly arrived at the palace by boat. A servant carried a large carpet into Caesar's room and said it was a gift for him. Is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra stepped out in front of the Roman general. This story later became one of the most famous moments in history. Caesar was surprised, but he was also impressed by the courage and intelligence of the young queen. That meeting changed the fate of Cleopatra and of Egypt itself. After speaking with Cleopatra, Julius Caesar decided to support her. He believed that Cleopatra had stronger leadership abilities and also saw political advantages in backing her. However, the advisors of Ptolemy XIII refused to accept this decision. Soon a war broke out, right in Alexandria. Caesar and Cleopatra were trapped inside the royal palace, with only a small number of Roman soldiers. Is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than outside. The Egyptian army tried to attack and burn the ships in the harbor. During this chaotic period, part of the famous library of Alexandria was believed to have caught fire, causing many priceless books of the ancient world to disappear. The fighting lasted for several months until Roman reinforcements finally arrived. In the end, Caesar's forces were victorious, and Ptolemy XIII died while trying to escape across the Nile River. Is less than #0. 7 hash is greater than Cleopatra successfully returned to her throne. After that victory, Cleopatra and Caesar became very close allies. The two spent a great deal of time together and even took a long journey along the Nile River. During this time, Cleopatra gave birth to a son and named him Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. She claimed that Julius Caesar was the child's father. Later, Cleopatra traveled to Rome for a period and lived in Caesar's villa, is less than #0. 7 is greater than. For the Romans, the presence of a powerful Eastern queen caused a great deal of controversy. Some people admired Cleopatra, but many others were suspicious and feared the influence she might have over Caesar. However, everything changed suddenly in 44 BC, when Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of Roman senators. His death threw the entire Roman world into chaos. When Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra was still in Rome. She quickly realized that the city was no longer safe for her and her son. So she immediately returned to Egypt. In the years that followed, Rome once again fell into a new struggle for power. Many leaders emerged, but one of the most important was Mark Antony, a famous general and a former ally of Caesar. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than after. Defeating the men who had killed Caesar, Antony and Octavian divided control of the Roman world between them. Antony took charge of the eastern regions where Egypt lay within his sphere of influence. Because he needed money and resources for his army, Antony asked Cleopatra to meet with him. This meeting would open a new chapter in the life of the Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra went to meet Mark Antony in the city of Tarsus on a magnificent ship with purple sails and silver oars. Everything was carefully prepared to create a powerful impression. Antony was truly captivated by the confidence and presence of the Queen of Egypt. The two quickly became allies and later lovers. This relationship brought benefits to both sides. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than. Antony received money and support from Egypt, while Cleopatra gained the protection of one of Rome's most powerful generals. Together, they had 3 children and spent many years living side by side. However, their relationship angered Octavian in Rome. He began spreading propaganda, claiming that Antony had been manipulated by Cleopatra and was no longer loyal to Rome. The tension between Octavian and Antony grew stronger and eventually led to war. In 31 BC, the two sides faced each other in a great naval battle at Actium. This battle would decide the future of the entire Mediterranean region. Antony and Cleopatra had many warships, but their strategy did not succeed as they had hoped. In the middle of the intense fighting, Cleopatra's fleet suddenly withdrew from the battlefield. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than. Antony chose to follow her, leaving most of his army behind. This decision caused the soldiers' morale to collapse, and many of them surrendered to Octavian. The defeat at Actium became a major turning point. From that moment on, the power of Antony and Cleopatra began to crumble rapidly, while Octavian moved closer to his final victory. After the defeat, Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt and tried to prepare for a final battle. But Octavian grew stronger and stronger, and many of their allies abandoned them. When Octavian's army advanced into Egypt, Antony received a rumor that Cleopatra had died. In despair, he stabbed himself with his sword. But the news was not true. Cleopatra was still alive. Her servants carried the dying Antony to see her. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than. He died in Cleopatra's arms. For the Queen of Egypt, this was the most tragic moment of her life. She knew that sooner or later Octavian would capture her. And she also understood what awaited her if she were taken to Rome as a prisoner in a triumphal parade. On August 1230 BC, Cleopatra made her final decision. She did not want to be taken to Rome as a symbol of defeat. According to many stories, she ended her own life, possibly by the venom of a snake or by poison. Cleopatra died at the age of 39, and with her, the age of the pharaohs of Egypt also came to an end. Octavian later turned Egypt into a province of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra's story did not disappear. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than more. Then 2,000 years later, people still tell the story of her life. A queen who was intelligent, bold, and full of ambition. If stories like this make learning English more interesting for you, remember to leave a comment and subscribe to Echoes of Time. And in the next video, we will explore another famous historical figure whose story is waiting to be told.